Top 10 waiver wire adds for week 6, and it is a big one because the injuries are continuing to pile up here, and we had several massive breakout performances from several players. So, who should we be adding on waivers this week? Michael Carter was one of my top waiver wire stashes last week, and the logic was that he really could be the lead back here. Now, heading into the week, we thought this would be a committee, that multiple backs would have a shot because that is what Arizona told us. And early on, that was kind of true. Carter started the game, and on that drive, he got the first touchdown. Then Bam Knight got in on the action and got a touchdown. But Carter dominated the carries with 18 for 51 yards and that touchdown. And the kicker was that he also had 5 receptions. We knew that Carter would likely be the lean in early down work, but Emari Demercado had an existing receiving role. Logically, we thought that Demercado would retain that role, but it was Carter who dominated. Carter does also have a history of being a reliable receiving option, so this does make sense and seems like something that he could retain moving forward. And he was the only active back that has actually shown the ability to be a regular 3-down back. Things could have been more of a committee heading into week 6, but Emari Demercado kind of solidified that not being an issue. He was going to earn some favor there with a massive touchdown run, but then he let the ball go at the goal line for a touchback. And I would not be shocked if we don't even see Emari Demercado next week. Benson is on IR. He's out for at least another 3 weeks. Carter should be the priority add in your league if he is available. Another one of our waiver wire stash guys, it is Mason Taylor. He has finally arrived. I'm so happy for him. 9 receptions, 12 targets, 67 yards, and got a 2-point conversion as well. In the stash video, I said that we wanted to roster Taylor because he has a legitimate claim to being the second look in this offense because it is Garrett Wilson and nobody else. And if there was a game for Taylor to go off, it was this game here against Dallas. The Jets have an objectively bad defense that is underperforming where it should be. Now, to be fair, some of that is caused by injury, but their defensive issues mean that Justin Fields is going to keep fairly solid pass volume. And again, as the second receiving look in this offense, Taylor now has weekly tight end 1 upside. Not a shocker, we also talked about Theo Johnson in my waiver wire stash video, again, that dropped on Saturday, so make sure that you're checking those out so you can get ahead. If you are not subscribed, I drop that video every single Saturday talking about players that we might want to be a week ahead on. They might have a game where they go off and we can grab them early for free and stash them. Theo Johnson was one of those guys. The logic was pretty simple here. The Giants will have a ton of available targets with Malik Neighbors out, and again, this week, we didn't see a ton of volume for Jackson Dart, but we don't need a ton of volume for our tight ends. We just need a good baseline of targets and touchdown opportunities, and that is exactly what we got from Johnson. Again, not a high volume day, but Johnson had 6 receptions on 7 targets for 33 yards and 2 touchdowns. Touchdown equity is key. Johnson is the clear tight end 1 with a rookie quarterback, and rookies tend to love to lean on their tight ends. Johnson is a viable streaming option with tight end 1 upside moving forward. Kendrick Bourne bid reasonably here because Kendrick Bourne will factually disappear when the 49ers receiving core is healthy. But the problem is that it's tough to say exactly how likely we are to see either Juwan Jennings or Ricky Pearsall return this week. The 49ers last week, they were on a short week, so we really didn't have any of those telltale indications from practice reports that would tell us how close they are to playing. Usually when I look at practice reports throughout the week, if I see DNPs throughout the entire week, I tend to lean that that player might be out the following week as well. But again, short week, we really can't tell there. And if even just one of Pearsall or Jennings is out, Bourne is a viable flex option here. We also have a lack of clarity around Brock Purdy's injury, which might actually benefit Kendrick Bourne because he has that built-in rapport with Mac Jones. We've talked about Kenneth Gainwell a lot over the past couple of weeks. Put away any preconceived notions regarding the Steelers' backfield here. Jalen Warren is the RB1. Kenneth Gainwell is the RB2 that also offers standalone value because of his receiving upside, and Aaron Rodgers being very friendly to checkdowns. And prior to the bye week, we learned that his upside is legitimately RB1 if Jalen Warren is out. So he is truly a high-end handcuff, a guy who will have the backfield all to himself when called upon when the RB1 is injured, and there is no desire to force a committee here with Caleb Johnson. After their Week 6 matchup against Cleveland, Pittsburgh has a very soft schedule in terms of defensive matchups. It's also important to note that Calvin Austin suffered an injury in the prior game, and if that injury extends into this week, I would not be shocked to see an increase in pass volume for both Jalen Warren, if he is active, and then Kenneth Gainwell as well, because the Steelers really don't have a wide receiver 2 that they trust beyond Calvin Austin. So with the injuries around that team, Gainwell has increased value here. At this point, it is very clear that Troy Franklin is the wide receiver 2 for the Broncos. Between Franklin, Marvin Mims, and Pat Bryant, Franklin has consistently had the second highest snap count behind Courtland Sutton. Now, to be clear, again, Courtland Sutton, who I love dearly, is the wide receiver 1 of that offense, and that is not changing. But the separation in terms of stats, targets between those two is not that significant. Sutton has 37 targets on the year. Franklin has 32 on the year. We want to invest now because the Broncos offense is about to hit an upswing. Bo Nix started off the season rough, right? But he's had 2 of the highest passing yard games that he's had over the past 2 weeks. And the Broncos have the Jets, the Giants, and Dallas up next. Yay, friendly matchups. Franklin has showcased both an excellent ceiling that we saw in week 2 where he had 8 receptions on 9 targets for 89 yards and a touchdown. And he's also shown a very solid floor, getting between 8 to 9 fantasy points in 3 of his other games with just 1 poor performance against the Chargers. Franklin is young. He's a steady wide receiver 2 that could really grow into his role and pay off very soon. Xavier Legette had a decent performance, but he has been so consistent at being inconsistent. I am not sure that we want to invest in trying to chase random points here. And it is still very low volume. We also had Jimmy Horn have a little breakout game too, but that's not something that we want to lean into. We talked about this in the Waiver Wire Stash video. When Coker returns, he will be the starting slot receiver, and that is a role that pairs very favorably with Bryce Young. In an ideal world, he is activated this week and plays against an extremely friendly Dallas defense. But even if he's not active, there is a clear void behind Hetero and McMillan, and Jalen Coker is the perfect fit. We saw his upside last season. The team traded away Adam Thielen because they felt very comfortable handing the reins in the slot over to Jalen Coker. Long-term, Coker has real value here. The numbers here are not good, right? But there are several very solid reasons to add Isaiah Bond this week. 1, Cedric Tillman's injury is likely a multi-week absence. 2, for the second week in a row, Bond actually led the receiving corps, and there is a clear separation between him and all the other receivers beyond Jerry Jeudy. 3, Dylan Gabriel's first start didn't result in big numbers for the receivers, but what it did show was a very clear progression forward for this offense. Minnesota's defense is not a layup, right? They tend to be tougher against the pass, especially for young, inexperienced quarterbacks. Aside from that Pittsburgh game, they have contained the pass very well. Cleveland has far better matchups ahead. Pittsburgh, Miami, New England, and then after their bye, they have quite literally all easy defensive matchups. The only challenge that they get is actually week 16 against Buffalo. Gabriel definitely added stability to the offense and should benefit the receivers in better matchups. Bond has real potential here. Again, we talked about this one in my waiver wire video. We want to roster Kendre Miller, not because we think that he is stealing Alvin Kamara's job. Maybe he actually is stealing Alvin Kamara's job. I'm slightly kidding, but in a game that New Orleans won and actually showcased offensive stability, the Saints reduced Kamara and increased snaps and touches for Kendre Miller. Now, Kamara still got the most snaps, but the gap is very small right now. And Kamara also still out-touched Miller in total touches, but Miller actually had more carries and was the more productive back. We have to consider 2 things here. Miller getting touches isn't specific to a game script. It doesn't have to happen in a blowout. It can happen win or lose. Additionally, the more that Miller continues to thrive, the more likely we are to see Alvin Kamara floated for potential real NFL trade rumors, particularly when we see so many running backs go down week after week. This is an investment that you want to make for the long run. Omarion Hampton suffered an injury on Sunday, and I do not have the details around the severity of the injury as of the filming of this video, but if it is serious, we have to look at adding a Chargers back. There are 2 options, right? And yeah, I'm going to cheat here, and I'm going to say both of the options because it is tough to have a lean in terms of who is the better add right now. Theoretically, Hassan Haskins should have the early down work, and Kimani Vidal should be the change of pace back, but those are just theories. Theories are just theories. We need to hear from the coaching staff. Unfortunately for us, from a fantasy football's perspective, we're not going to likely hear anything from the coaching staff. They're not going to go into any details until after waivers run, and they determine the timeline for Hampton's injury and their game plan for the week. So for now, do not assign a priority to one versus the other. Haskins has been the one that has been active since the beginning of the season, but that is because he had a place on special teams. We just saw the same thing with Arizona with Michael Carter and Amari DiMercado. Carter was inactive. He didn't have a place on special teams. Now we get the injury, and Carter is the one that had the priority in the backfield over DiMercado. Vidal could end up being the preferred back here, even though he was inactive through the first 3 games. I will also say, though, I think we do have a tiny bit of indication here because the Chargers are in a rough spot with their offensive line, but the upcoming matchups are very friendly. So whoever the Chargers indicate will get the early down work. That is the one that we want because these games here should be competitive. Bonus here, I gave you 10, but let me give you one more here because it goes without saying that I like to keep this waiver wire list below 50%. I don't want to have guys that are too high rostered, but if Tre Tucker is on your waivers, and technically he is around 50% rostered in different apps, if he is on waivers, you need to add him because in a game without Brock Bowers, in a game where in theory Jacoby Myers should have seen an uptick in production, Myers put up another pedestrian single-digit fantasy performance. Tucker is the more reliable wide receiver. He might be the wide receiver 1 of that team. We just need to come to terms with it at this point. He has the far higher ceiling, a more trustworthy floor. He is operating as the wide receiver 1. If he is out there, grab him. Thank you so much for tuning into my video. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel. You can find me across all social media platforms at It's Terra Time. So make sure that you are tuned in because I'm bringing you more fantasy football advice all season long. Every week I've got you covered with waiver wire ads, start sits, live shows with live Q&A where you can ask me questions, and so much more.